Good morning, colleagues, once again. Can I get a thumbs up if colleagues can hear me clearly? Dr. David, you can confirm if you can hear me?
Hi, Nkosi. Now I can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for that, Doc. My name is Kosia Tunduli. I'm from the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School. I would like to welcome each and every one of you colleagues for taking your time in attending today's workshop titled Addressing Underperformance, Recognizing Early Struggles, and Taking Proactive Action. So, thank you so much, colleagues, for taking your time in attending today's workshop in this very cold weather. Before we can move on, I would like firstly to let you know or let you aware that this workshop is recorded. We will keep the recording of each and every workshop that we are making. So the recording as well as the presentation of this workshop will be posted to your respective Moodle communities, which includes your supervisor community as well as the PDRF Moodle community. However, now we have moved our platform to the RCT management system, which is the platform that is available under Ulink. You just log into your Ulink profile, and under services, the last option is RCTMS. That is where you will log in and complete your profile. It will take you straight to the platform that we are currently using now, whereby you can book your workshop prior, as well as be able to access previous workshop recordings, as well as the presentations of the past workshops. You can also generate your own certificate of attendance just after you have registered the workshop, immediately after the workshop has ended, and then you can generate your own certificate of attendance. So, with that being said, colleagues, now allow me to go through some few housekeeping rules. Please feel free to use the chat, ask questions, or raise your hand to engage in discussion. We encourage an interactive and collaborative environment, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts or your experiences. I will enable all your mics, colleagues. Please do make sure that your mic is always muted when you don't have a question or when you don't have any contribution to make. However, you are more than welcome to just raise a hand or alternatively type under chat or under Q&A. I'll notify Dr. David that someone has a question or any contribution under the chat or under Q&A. Or if you have raised your hand, I'll notify or stop Dr. David in any time of his presentation. I will also be sharing a feedback toward the end of the session. The feedback, colleagues, it helps us in terms of improving our service delivery, as well as to see the impact we are making for the postgraduate student, postgraduate research fellows, and supervisors. So we kindly request you, colleagues, to take your 3 minutes or 2 minutes to complete the feedback survey so that we can also give feedback to our facilitators for taking their time in facilitating these kinds of workshops. The feedback also ensures that we get your correct information in terms of now issuing the certificate of attendance to those colleagues that get certificates via email, whereby we have to generate certificates for them and send the certificate back to them. So we usually get the information via that feedback that we shared with other colleagues. So the feedback includes all your information, although when we're sending out it to facilitators, it becomes anonymous. So we don't show your details there. Your details are just for the issuing of the certificate. So now I introduce our facilitator, which is Dr. David, Dr. Lorenzo David. Thank you so much for honoring our invite and taking your time to facilitate today's workshop. Allow me, colleagues, to read Dr. David bio. Dr. Lorenzo David is currently a coordinator at the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School, University of Johannesburg. Dr. David was recently awarded a PhD in biochemistry for his assessment of transferring tech gold palladium and gold palladium bimetallic nanoparticles and their potential for anti-cancer drug delivery at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. By adopting a holistic approach to education, Dr. David hopes to inspire students to achieve personal and academic success with a hands-on and learner-centric approach to value-based learning. With that being said, colleagues, thank you once again, and let's warmly welcome our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo David. I would like to thank you for taking your time, and we look forward to a productive and insightful session. I now hand over to Dr. Lorenzo David. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Nkosi, and welcome, colleagues. I hope you all are well on this very cold Thursday. I would like to thank you for making the time to join us for this session. So I'm just going to go about, Nkosi, sharing my slides. I'll put it on um, presenter mode. We'll see. Are you able to see the title slide?
Yes, Doc, we can
Okay,
see your slide now.
okay, perfect. Um, So I'm going to try and keep, as usual, this presentation under an hour and just leave a bit more time, if I can even cut it down a bit more, to leave a bit of time in terms of discussion. I feel that, when it comes to addressing underperformance and identifying it, as students are so unique themselves, I mean, each person is obviously unique. Each of us in a role that we take as a supervisor may have come across different scenarios and different situations. So I would like to hear from some members present here today. What have you identified? How have you gone about resolving this? And I think the discussion will enrich all of us, to be honest. So, with regards to the presentation today, it's titled Addressing Underperformance, Recognizing Early Struggles, and Taking Proactive Action. And I think this is something, as always, which is quite important because as we go through the presentation, we'll see the earlier we're able to not only identify, but connect with the student to find out what's going on and bring about some change and, try and resolve the issues, we save the student actually a lot of time. We're not doing it 3 months before their thesis is due and they still have lab work that is remaining. So the earlier we are able to intervene as a supervisor, identify what's going on, find out some information and come up with a plan, the better it's going to be for the student, as well as it's going to be less stressful on the part of the supervisor as well. So, in today's session, in summary, we'd like to help you to recognize the early signs of underperformance. Now, all of us have been students. We have some understanding of it, but let's just try and formalize this, unpack some of the root causes. As we go through the presentation, we'll see not always is this underperformance due primarily to, let's just say, a student not wanting to work or a student being lazy. There are other factors we need to keep in mind that we are working with people, and sometimes things go on in people's lives which can affect their work, especially when they're students as well. So we'll take that into consideration. And we'd like to explore some tools for timely, effective intervention while building more reflective supervision cultures. And this is across disciplines as well. So, as an icebreaker, um, I know generally we don't have a lot of people who just unmute and speak, but please feel free at any point in this presentation. We really would like to discuss this with you. So the question goes like this: what does underperformance look like in your context? So you as a supervisor, what does underperformance look like? Does it mean not showing up in terms of meetings and not coming into the lab or into university? Is it missing deadlines in terms of your submissions? Is it, just being MIA for a couple of months? So in your specific context or in your capacity as a supervisor or a potential supervisor, what does underperformance look like? So if you feel comfortable, please type one word or phrase that signals early underperformance in your supervision experience. Now you can pop this in the chat. You can feel free to unmute and we'll just give it about 15, 20 seconds. And then we'll move on to the next slide. And even as we go through the presentation, if anything pops in mind, please feel free to put it into the chat, and Mr. Nkosi will bring it to our attention as well. So as I usually would do in this session, um, I'll just try and give an example from my perspective, and I hope that some of you will share your thoughts in the chat as well. So from my perspective, what does underperformance look like? So if I look at myself in terms of where I am currently, very early researcher or emerging academic, a young emerging academic, and what would underperformance in terms of a student look like? Well, I think it would be many of the things that I have actually mentioned previously. It would be, does a student keep to submission deadlines? Is a student submitting, work that is of a good standard? Are they attending the meetings? Are they coming into the lab to, start on their projects? So I think that from my personal perspective, underperformance would not just be a single thing. It's obviously taking into account all of the different responsibilities that have been placed on the student. What do they have to submit? What deadlines do they have? And having an overarching view. So if they are missing most of these, then I would consider that underperformance. And obviously, this will be formalized in terms of when they submit a piece of work to me, and I can see it's not up to the standard as well. So, in terms of the session objectives, seems like there's quite a bit for us to go through, but we will cover most of these quite quickly. We're going to start off with recognizing early struggles. How do we go about identifying it, and what is the advantage of it? The next, thereafter, we'll move on to diagnosing some of the root causes. So, obviously, if we identify, firstly, we have to be aware that there is actually an issue, which means we have to have that level of contact with our students. Um, so thereafter we go into how do we go about helping the student? How do we go about diagnosing what is the root cause of it? Because very often, even if a student may present as being very lazy, as we've said, or may just present as being disinterested, that may not actually be the root cause. That may actually just be a symptom. And I've heard in conversations with other academics over the years, many have said it's not my responsibility, or a few have said it's not my responsibility as a supervisor to get involved in anything personal. And while I do agree, I will understand that. I think that especially when we're dealing with students and the young people, we do have, and they are obviously our students, and we are their supervisors in a professional setting. I think that if we can see our student is actually going through something, nothing stops us from trying to help or even pointing them in the right direction where they can get some help as well. Um, and then we're going to move on to feedback that changes trajectories. How do we structure our feedback so that it's no longer seen as obviously just being my supervisor's telling me everything that I'm doing wrong? It seems like everything that I'm doing wrong, and then the world is crashing down around me. And it moves into something like, okay, so I see what I'm doing wrong, I see what I'm doing right. This is the path moving forward. And this will just touch on obviously some of the workshops that it'll just be a single slide touching on some of the key points from previous workshops as well. Then we're going to go into some structured intervention tools. How do we go about assisting the student? Because we understand that when we have these conversations with students, it's very easy for them, and they may be very highly motivated within that period to be like, yes, you know what, I will submit, or they will agree to all of the questions or the demands that you've placed on them in terms of meeting these requirements. But we understand that especially when it comes to students, we need to have some sort of structured approach, and this can involve weekly meetings or monthly meetings, or some sort of progress report to ensure that they are actually keeping, and the motivation is maintaining over the year and the semesters. They mainly go to supervisor self-awareness as well as some collaborative cultures. I was going to speak on some case examples, but I think I would actually like to change that to some maybe real world discussions and experiences that members of the audience may want to share with us. And then we'll go into some writing struggles and support. And obviously, when it comes to addressing underperformance, one of the first red flags that we will pick up that there is actually an issue is when submissions are not coming in, or when the submissions come in and they are not of the standard that we require. So obviously that becomes a major red flag for us. So what are some of the major writing struggles? What causes it, and how do we go about supporting the students? And lastly, we end up with some group reflections as well as direction. So the first section is going to deal on early identification. And I think as we move through this, we're going to understand why exactly does early recognition matter. So we understand we've all been in the position of being a student, and we know that these problems don't appear overnight. A student doesn't register today to pursue their PhD, and 2 weeks later, they are delayed on everything, right? So we understand that problems don't usually appear overnight, they grow gradually. And it's from learned behavior as well. So by us being able to intervene early, it helps preserve relationships and outcomes. So what do we mean by this? If we have taken on a new student, we have this initial meeting with them, we are happy, we sign all the documentation, they are registered. They are now officially our student. I think one of the first steps for us to do, and we've mentioned this, and this has been mentioned in several other workshops, would be have a meeting, clarify expectations. And this will be expectations from yourself as a supervisor, and understand the expectations of the student as well. That is the first step. You can thereafter go and formalize that in a supervisor agreement, which can be between you and the student. And in terms of this, we can say, these are the deadlines that we have agreed to. You will submit, let's just say, a progress report to me every month, or whatever the specifics may be. And in it, you can also put, as a general rule, I will provide feedback on any submitted piece of work within, let's just say, 2 weeks, to give yourself, a bit of time. So by us actually doing this early, now, why would it be important for us to, well, once we lay this out, once we have this agreement, and then we start to see that the student is not keeping to it. Let's just say it starts off by them missing the first progress report, and then there's excuses, and they're not coming into campus. So we are starting to identify patterns. We can see, okay, this is what we've agreed on, and this is actually what's not being met in the agreement. So whilst identifying it obviously early, it allows us to save time, because once we address the issues early, we speak to the student, they have not wasted 6 months, 8 months, a year, or even sometimes 2 years. And they have been, if I think back to, there's been some examples that I've been made aware of where students would register for their PhD, and their supervisor would only see them in the first month, which would be, let's just say, February, and then maybe a few days throughout the year, and the student would come and work hard again in December, just to catch up on the fact that they missed out 8 months of work or whatever it may be. So in that case there, the student has actually wasted a lot of time. So by us being able to identify this early, we are saving them time, we are also saving them effort, and also it allows us to instill good values in the students earlier. Very often when students come to postgraduate degrees, they see that a lot is left up to them. They are left to manage their own time. And not many of us coming in as postgraduates actually know how to effectively manage our time. I know I definitely did not. So by us being able to identify that, what we can do is actually instill these good values in our students, and thereby allowing them to start off on the right foot, start off, better than we would have actually. Okay, so we're going to move on to structured monitoring and feedback loops. What would be some of the best practices? So I think back to my supervisor, some of my previous supervisors, and they were very different styles in terms of how they approached supervision. And I always think that a good balance between the two. Sometimes you will get a supervisor who wants to know every single day what you're doing in the lab. And if there's no progress, there's issues. There's going to be some sort of disciplinary action that is taken, or maybe just a strong conversation. And then you get supervisors who you may not even see for a month or a month and a half. And all of a sudden, there's some emails that comes through. I need A, B, and C. So what I found to be, in my personal opinion, what works best is sort of like a balanced approach. And how can this here be achieved? We can set recurring meetings with a fixed agenda. So I understand that if we have a lot of students, it will be difficult to have these one-on-one meetings. So we can set monthly group research meetings, let us say, with a fixed agenda where students can provide, obviously, their progress up to date, and you can provide feedback on that as well too. Um, Something which we found to be very useful is to use shared supervision logs to track feedback as well. And previous workshops have been done in terms of some of the technology we can use. I think if we try to manage a project, excuse me, a program such as Trello actually works quite well for a supervisor. And I think it's important for us to make deliverables and timelines transparent from day one. Um, so when it comes to students, especially postgraduate students, and I will drive home this point, many of us coming into postgraduate studies, especially when we're much younger, let's just say as an example, in your honors and your masters, you may not have very good time management skills. So by setting up and this structuring this environment for the student, we are not giving them room to actually waste time. They will be working because they know they have deadlines to work towards. And very often I feel that that works quite well for students. So we're going to move on to some behavioral red flags and some common signs of struggle. Um, and these are something that many of us would have experience with as well. So the first one's going to be avoiding supervision meetings. Um, Often, not always. Sometimes there are actually valid reasons why a student can't attend a meeting with a supervisor. But if this becomes a recurring theme and we see the student is actually never pitching up, or they're always late, they only make it for the last 10 minutes of the meeting, and there's always excuses, this is actually a red flag that something is not right. Why are they avoiding this meeting? Why do they not want to present, obviously, what's going on? The second sign that we've identified, or that is easily identifiable, is submitting incomplete or poor quality drafts. And obviously, this is something that is going to stand out to us um, much more easily. So if we, once we speak to our students, generally we'll get a sense of their understanding of the topic, especially if we're discussing the project. And if we see there is a misalignment sometimes between our conversation with the students and what they're submitting, we can identify maybe there's an issue with their writing, maybe there's something else going on personally, and then we can try and approach that, or help them, assist them in getting the help that they need. Something which is also quite important would be appearing emotionally withdrawn or anxious. And I think burnout, anxiety, stress, mental health in terms of students is something, well, all of us, is actually very, very important. So we need to be aware, are there any changes in behavior that's happening with our students? Something which I also want to add, it's not on the slides, but something I'd like to discuss is in terms of being able to deal with the pressure. We notice that when students come in, especially towards their higher postgraduate degrees, there's a lot of pressure that's placed, and we all understand because we've been there. And certain people would be able to handle the pressure, and certain students, they may look for unhealthy alternatives to help them to cope. So I think as a supervisor as well, it's also important for us to keep an eye in terms of and have these conversations. Are our students actually managing? Are there any major changes in behavior? And while we will never accuse anyone. That's not the point of this. The point is that as a supervisor, we understand the stresses and pressures which are put on students. We understand how, certain students may fall victim to, let's just say, alcohol or anything of that sort. So I think that it's also important for us to be aware of their behaviors, and by doing that, help them to get assist them in getting the help if any of them actually need it as well. And this will also lead into avoiding eye contact as well as communication delays. So if we notice that there are any major behavioral changes in terms of our student, in terms of the quality of their work, in terms of them missing their deadlines, I think the first point of call will actually be let us have a conversation just to assess how the student is doing. And nothing stops you as a supervisor from having a 5-minute discussion, even if it's a chat in the hallway, and ask the student, how are you doing? How are you managing? Is there anything that I can help with? Because at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, that is one of our responsibilities as a supervisor. It's not just to help them to get through the degree, but also to assist them with any issues that they're having. I mean, we would have learned from our own experiences, maybe certain techniques on how to deal with stress, how to manage time. So these are also key tips that we can actually pass on to our students as well. So I think I'd also like to add this in, like, if we look at this in terms of a clinical environment, behavior is a form of communication as well. It's obviously non-verbal communication. And if we are able to identify these red flags, we will see they will often point to deeper issues. And obviously, these are some issues that we will actually have to discuss, that we will be discussing in the next section. So some of the key themes that we are seeing here is that we firstly need to identify, that there is an issue, identify that there is a struggle as an example, and thereafter we move on to the next section with how do we go about assisting the students um, with that as well. So we've titled the slide, Not Just Motivation, Hidden Struggles Could Also or Could Be the Underlying Cause. I think as supervisors and potential supervisors, it's sometimes very easy for us to assume that if a student is not meeting the deadlines, automatically they are being lazy, automatically they're wasting time. But we need to understand that in the academic environment, in a university setting, we're dealing with people and we are dealing with young people as well. And very often, all people go through things, they have their ups and their downs. So we need to take into consideration that maybe there's something else going on as well. So the first point we'd like to speak on would be mental health struggles. Now, this is something which we would know that many students, be it a student just feeling overwhelmed, they feeling a bit depressed, they may be feeling anxious, whatever it may be, and this can directly affect their work. So I think being able to have these conversations, and obviously we are always saying there's going to be clear boundaries between the student and the supervisor. It'll always be professional, but what we're saying is nothing stops us from having that human interaction, just checking that everything is okay as well. Uh, The next one could be role confusion or unclear expectations. Um, so sometimes when a student comes in and everything seems a bit overwhelming for them, they may not be fully aware. While they may have agreed to it because due to the excitement of the moment, they may not be completely clear on what is expected of them as a postgraduate student in terms of the work, in terms of the hours, in terms of the issues and the challenges that you're going to face as well. So I think that it's important for us to obviously make these clear and assist the student as well, and let it be known to them as well that these challenges that you will face in postgraduate studies, you are not alone in it. If you speak to 9 out of 10 PhD students, 9 out of 10 of them will give you similar issues in terms of what they faced, in getting this degree as well. And I think we can never ever limit financial or personal stress. As much as we say when we come to work, we leave all personal issues, outside. At the end of the day, we are people and people go through issues as well. So these are all contributing factors which can be actually affecting a student's ability to perform in their role as well. Something which is quite an issue is when a student starts to feel isolated or they feel that there's a lack of community. Now, this can be due to several reasons. We, as a supervisor, actually set the tone for our research group, and I'm just going to use the example of our lab because that's the background that I'm coming from. So, in doing so, if we are not setting the right environment and the right example, we'll see that there's going to start to be issues within our research group itself. And that can lead to certain students actually isolating themselves, maybe due to conflict, whatever it may be. There will be a lack of cohesiveness, and obviously this is going to affect the morale of the entire group as well. And we understand that certain students can be greatly affected by this. So I think the onus is upon us once again to ensure that we are checking in with those students, as often as we can, that we are identifying, that we're looking at their behavior, and that we will assist them whenever possible. I think the next slide we will deal on power imbalances as well as emotional toll issues. So we'll be reading up some in preparation for this workshop. And what we came across is a paper by Moten, and we actually will put this, I haven't added in the resources section, but I will add it before this presentation is uploaded to Moodle. So what we've summarized is that Safran research shows that power dynamics often go unacknowledged, but it can actually profoundly shape a student's confidence and progress. I mean, obviously, the relationship that you have with your supervisor is actually very important. So this is especially true in the underrepresented or marginalized groups. And this obviously was research conducted by Moten et al. The title of the paper was Supervision in South Africa Higher Education, and I will provide the link to that later as well. So moving back to the slide, we will talk about power imbalances and emotional toll issues. So we know that depending on your supervision style, how students may see you is, let me just rephrase that. When you are supervising a student, we notice that obviously the student is coming to you for guidance and support. Now, the type of relationship and how you interact with the student actually affects their confidence or will have an influence on their confidence, obviously moving through the degree. So what we've actually identified is that if you, or let's just say your supervisor is actually delaying or withholding feedback, what is this effect going to have on the student itself? So we've heard of examples, and these are obviously universities across the world when we speak to some of our friends and colleagues. And they can be examples where a student will submit, let's just say chapter 2, which is a literature review, and they will only get feedback 3 or 4 months later. Now, obviously, what effect do you think that is going to have on the student themselves in terms of delaying their progress? And then they're going to have a period of 3 to 4 months where they're not going to have clear direction because they're not sure on what the next steps is. So let's just say it's a research project and they've sent you their data and they only get feedback 2 months later. That means in the past 2 months, they've not known which direction this project is supposed to go in as well. So we need to think about our responsibility in terms of assisting the students as well. The next point is going to be emotional avoidance or superiority complexes. This will be a very touchy topic, but what we just like to say here is that we should always maintain a professional environment and professional behavior when we're at work. Understand that we are there to support the students. That is one of our primary goals. We want to see them do better. We want to develop them into better researchers. And that should be one of the goals that we lay out, obviously, as young emerging academics as well. And the last point we'll speak about here is inequities in communications or support. So we need to also think that if we want to assist a student or when we're providing feedback to them as well, we need to be as clear and concise and be as descriptive as possible. The more meetings we have with the student, especially earlier on, helps them to get a clear understanding of what our expectations are as a supervisor. And for this particular project, it gives them clear direction. One of the worst things we can do as a supervisor is, let's just say hypothetically, we new and emerging, we take on 4 students, but realistically, we only have sufficient time for one. So what do? We take that time for the one and we split it. And thereafter, the way in which we interact with each of the student is going to be diminished because we have so many other responsibilities as well. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that when we take on the role of being a supervisor, we need to ensure that we are able to communicate with the students, communicate clear and concisely, and be there to support them, especially early on in their journey as well. So once again, we're going to speak a bit on feedback, and we understand that high impact feedback uh, and what these feedback practices should be. So we've covered this in actually quite a bit of detail in previous workshops. I'm just going to go through this quite quickly. The first one is that we've identified that feedback needs to be specific, not vague. Reason being, or let's just say as an example, we don't ever want to see, or even as a student, we never want to see a comment such as rewrite, redraft. This does not make sense. Improve clarity. Um, because we're not sure exactly what they're talking about. Rewrite. What part of this paragraph do you want me to rewrite? Do you want me to rewrite the entire thing? Do you want me to change the content? The student has no idea what exactly is going on in your mind. So therefore, we need to be specific. The next one is timely. In your supervisor agreement, if you say that feedback will be provided within 2 weeks, then try to stick to that as much as possible. If there's obviously something that comes up, communicate with the student as well, so they're not left wondering even if you received their chapter in the first place. We need to understand that the role of feedback is to be supportive. We're not there just to, point out what they're doing wrong. That's not a balanced approach. So when it comes to feedback, it should be balanced. And we've spoken about the sandwich technique previously, which is firstly, you highlight to the students, this is, I like what you've done here. I like that your writing is clear, concise, there's logical flow, whatever it may be. Thereafter, you go and you say, however, I feel that we can improve on these sections, and then you list out what you did not like, and then you can end it off always with being like, this is how we're going to improve. So feed forward in the end, which is this is how we're going to improve our ability in these sections moving forward. And we need to understand always that feedback needs to be focused on improvement, and this needs to come through in our comments. We need to make the student aware that we are not criticizing them. We are basically reading and providing feedback on the work, and they should take this feedback and use it to improve themselves as well. It is never a personal judgment at all. Excuse me. So we're going to go on to a bit of a discussion point that I'd like to have. I hope we can have a discussion on this. Would be the problem of failure to fail. So what does this mean? Some supervisors actually avoid honest critique because they fear conflict, depending on the type of relationship that you have with your student as well. I mean, sometimes as a friend of mine was actually graduated a few years before me, and they took on a PhD student that was actually much older than them. I think it was like a 10 or 15-year gap between the supervisor and the student. The student was much older. And because of that sort of situation, I think my friend, when we was talking, they actually said they found it quite difficult to actually provide honest critique because out of, this is an older person, so they wanted to have more respect for them as well. So in this case, they actually, for a short period of time, avoided honest critique because they feared the conflict of how this would come across. Would it be disrespectful? Um, but what I think they actually came to understand is that vague encouragement can actually prolong underperformance. By us not addressing issues obviously early on, by us sweeping under the rug or saying, maybe just touching on it, but not being clearly and directive in the way we're communicating, we will actually be doing the student a disservice because we actually allow them to continue with these behaviors which are not going to benefit them. And it's going to come to a point where eventually they will realize, you know what, I actually have to be at campus every day. I need to meet these deadlines. I do not have enough time to actually write out this entire thesis. Um, so we're trying to actually shorten the time it takes between, for them to realize that as well. So I'd just like to leave this open, and I'm actually just going to leave it open for a minute or two to the audience if anyone would like to add in any maybe some past experiences that you have, even as a student, or what you've actually found to be useful as a supervisor in terms of how do you go about providing honest critique that is balanced but also truthful, not sugarcoating anything for the students. We would appreciate any feedback or discussion that you may have on this point.
Thank you, Doc. Colleagues, I have enabled all your mics, so if you do want to make any contribution, you can just unmute your mic, or alternatively just type under the chat, and then I will go through the chat or under Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkosi. Seems that everyone is a bit quiet today. That's fine. If anyone would like to jump in at the end of the session as well, that's completely fine, and maybe provide some of your insights or any advice that you may have for the rest of us as well. So, first step is number one, we have identified that our student is actually going through a bit of a struggle. We've thought about it, and we've identified also that it may not just be there, so the student is lazy, they may actually be going through something, maybe emotionally, maybe in terms of the family, maybe financially, whatever it may be, maybe mentally. And we've taken these into consideration. We've had the discussion with the student informally. We've tried to be supportive. We tried to provide them with resources to get help. Excuse me. So how do we go about what's the next step? We're going to formalize the remediation process step by step. How do we go about doing this? The first one is going to be, as we've just said, early informal support. We're going to have a chat with the student, check how they're doing, what challenges are they facing, how can we help as a supervisor, what information do you need? So what we're trying to do firstly is that we're going to provide the student with the resources and maybe even the contact numbers. Let's just say if the student is going through some issues in terms of mental health, we can provide them or help them to set up an appointment with PsychEd here at UJ, as an example, right? We provide them with the resources. The next point is going to be a written plan with goals. And it's important for it to be written because if it is written, you have some sort of documentation, if this actually escalates later on, the student still is not meeting their targets and their goals as well. So it's important for you to sit down with the student and agree on achievable timelines in terms of their goals. Now, if I think of myself as a student, if there was a period that I was really struggling through for whatever reason, and I had a meeting with my supervisor, I was always the type of student who I will agree to all of the deadlines that the supervisor gives me, even if I know it is going to be quite difficult to achieve. Because in that moment, you just want to, let's just say, motivate yourself to actually get through this work as well. So I think setting achievable goals with our students not only is important to prevent burnout, but it also will help them with their own confidence. Because if we set these unachievable goals, the moment they fail the first one or they miss the first deadline, it's just going to be a snowball effect after that as well. So as a supervisor, we actually need to sit down and use some of our experience in terms of working out or assisting them with their timeline as well as planning with their goals. What's the next step? When is this due, etc. And obviously, this will be followed by, let's just say we understand a student is going through something, and we say, okay, so over the next month, you need to achieve these four things in the lab. So we will have weekly meetings, let's just say every Thursday or every Friday, whatever day you choose, to check your progress. And if we see after this little period, you can even call it a tiny probation period, we see that there is actually no improvement. The student has not reached any of their goals. Um, Thereafter, you need to maybe consider what are the next steps. Maybe go and speak to a senior member of the faculty or go and speak to HOD, etc., and ask them, what would the next steps be? And it doesn't always have to be a bad thing in terms of escalating a situation because you're not trying to get the student into trouble or you're not trying to get them expelled, for lack of a better word. What you're trying to do is see how best to assist them. And that is always the goal that we should have as supervisors, in my personal opinion. So what can this mean? Maybe if the student is going through something financially, maybe something mentally, whatever pressure that they have, maybe they just need a bit of an abeyance, shall we say, or a period of time where they get a couple months off to go and just, deal with the issues that they're facing, come back maybe in the next semester refreshed, and they will obviously be able to kick on from there as well. So I think our role as a supervisor should never be seen as, we just need to, oh, we just need to kick the student out of there. That's never what we want to do, but how do we help them achieving their goal? Then we're going to go into role clarity and ethical boundaries checklist. Um, so, as we said previously, it's important for us to establish our expectations early on, discuss your communication preferences. Certain students would like to be communicated in email versus, certain people would like to have a conversation, etc. And Kosi, can I just ask, my laptop made a bit of a weird sound. Are you still able to hear me?
Yes, Doc, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It seems to have switched over. Okay, so the first thing is, I'll just recap because I kind of lost my train of thought. The first one's going to be establish our expectations early, and this is going to be in the early meetings that we have with our students and the supervisor agreement that we're going to sign with them. The next point is discuss your communication preferences, you as a supervisor and them as a student. And I think it's also important for you to address any ethical gray areas before conflict arises. And what does this mean in terms of boundaries? So, especially coming in as young, we are younger academics, we're coming in, and I think it's easier sometimes for students to feel that maybe you're always available, or that they see you more as a friend rather than their supervisor. And, obviously, there always needs to be that professional relationship that exists between a student and a supervisor. So I think being able to clarify what are the boundaries, as an example, if you email me beyond a particular time, please expect a response only the next morning. Or if for whatever reason, sometimes your students will have to have your contact details or your WhatsApp or whatever else it may be, maybe clarify after a certain time, unless it's an absolute emergency. That's the only time you would contact me. Otherwise, please leave all communication until the next day as well. So the reason we say this is because we should not assume that students can understand our role or their own, and it's on us to actually provide this clarity to prevent confusion as well as to strengthen trust as well. So I'm approaching the end of the presentation. The next point is going to be peer supervision and support circles benefits. So very often when students are isolated, maybe a new student has come into your lab and they feel a bit overwhelmed, it's very easy for them to start missing deadlines because they're not exactly sure what they need to be doing. So maybe we need to take that into consideration as well. It's not that the student's not working hard, it's that the student maybe does not have a clear understanding of what is expected of them, even though in your conversations they say that they do. So I think in this type of environment, it's important for us, and I always say this in conversation with friends, that when you come in to PhD specifically, um, I never had a conversation with anyone prior to that who actually prepared me in terms of the challenges that you will face. That you will go months and months sometimes with experiments not working out, not being able to find papers, not being able to find methods. It's just one challenge after the other. And if you don't have that expectation coming in to higher degrees, then it's going to be a bit of a shock and it will shake your foundations in many cases. So I think us as supervisors being able to normalize challenges and clarify these expectations for students that you will face these challenges, but just understand you're not alone. We are here to help you and help you to get through this as well. I think it's also important for us to, in terms of peer supervision, to share strategies and emotional support. And obviously, this is always within professional boundaries. And what can this do? Within our research group, if we are actually able to support, set up a support circle, even if we're just going out and spending time like a team building exercise, shall we say, it allows the students to get closer together, um, get to know each other, and be comfortable enough to ask one another for help as well. And by doing that, we will actually reduce feelings of isolation, especially in newer and younger students coming in, help them, to reach out when they need the help, and it will help them to actually achieve their goals much easier as well. And this, we've actually spoken about this previously. So how do we go about tracking the progress of the students and ensuring that they are keeping to their deadlines? The first one's going to be joint supervision reflections, um, which essentially is going to mean thinking about, well, metacognition is going to be thinking about thinking. So basically, we're going to focus on helping students to reflect on how their work can actually help solve academic and personal obstacles. Then we're going to move on to a bit more practical tools, which include journals for tracking, let's just say, academic progress. So, coming from a science background, we understand that your lab book is actually one of the most important books that you can deal with. All of your notes is going to be in there. So, like we said previously, they can be an online document in which the student can actually track their academic progress or their progress in the lab, and then you as a supervisor can actually just have an oversight over it all the time. And the last point is going to be monthly review templates or monthly review meetings where you can meet with the student to track their progress, track what challenges they're having, and assist them with those challenges because they don't need to spend days and days or even weeks sometimes trying to resolve an issue. Maybe something you have a paper that will be able to assist them much easier as well. So we have mentioned this previously, we've touched on it a bit, but we're gonna end off this presentation just briefly speaking about writing as a struggle, um, and basically how to identify some red flags. We've spoken about this previously, so the first point we're going to speak about is delays in draft submission. So if we are not receiving the work from the student, can be one of a few factors. Very often it may be the student is obviously not done. Um, Maybe because they're not working or because they're not sure in terms of the direction. So these are issues we'll have to address. When we do receive it, if there's fragmented structure, so we need to understand, is this more on an issue in terms of how the student is writing, or does this link into the understanding of the topic? I think that if there's an issue in terms of the actual writing style, this is easier to address than it would be for if the student is not actually aware of what their research area contains. If we see students are repeating past mistakes, that means they're not taking our feedback. They're not understanding why we're giving them the feedback, and therefore we will have to try and clarify this in meetings with them. And the last one is going to be in terms of fear of critique. So if we provide feedback to the student gets offended, they don't want to hear anything that we're saying. This is actually a red flag as well, and we maybe need to have a conversation to clarify the point of feedback. We're not critiquing them, we're trying to improve their work at the end of the day. So now that we've identified some red flags, how do we go about supporting the writing skills? Some effective strategies. The first one is to encourage the use of templates. So within a particular research group, we understand that, let's just say we're focusing on a certain area, maybe cancer research. Okay, so obviously this falls within science. Science is going to have a particular template, and therefore we can provide a generalized or a specific template to our students in this is what I expect of you. Because if a student has a clear understanding of what each section heading is going to be in terms of introduction, let's say abstract introduction, methods and materials, results discussion, conclusion, they have something to work towards. It makes it easier. They're not going to feel as lost. The next point is going to be promoting writing groups or sprints. And this is something that we actually heard about. Well, I heard about quite recently. In certain universities overseas, particularly, they will have online meetings or even in-person meetings where a group of students will just get together with a supervisor. They will discuss on certain aspects of a project or different projects, and they will sit together and they will write. And by doing that, they're basically we learning from one another. It's peer learning essentially. And the last point is give feedback on structure, not just on grammar. We don't just want to correct at the superficial level. We want to obviously go deeper in terms and critically analyze the content and also pass on these skills to the students as well. So came across this quote, and I think I'd like to end with this. Um, I'm still to find the author. I'm sure with a bit more bit of a search I will be able to. But essentially, the quote was, "The earlier we listen, the gentler the intervention." So by us being able to identify and intervene much earlier, it's going to be less painful for the student because there's less of the negative behavior that they will have to change and less time which has actually been wasted as well. So with that, I'd like to hand over back to you, Mr. Nkosi, and if there's any questions or discussions or even contributions from the audience, we'd be happy to take it. But other than that, thank you very much, Nkosi. I hand over back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. David, for such a very informative and productive session. Now we open the floor for the questions or any contributions the colleague would like to make. This is now the platform. So you can just unmute your mic, no need to raise a hand. If you do have anything to say or any contributions you would like to make, or alternatively, you can type under the chat. So I'll be waiting for questions or any contribution. In the meantime, colleagues, I've shared the feedback under the chat. So I kindly request you to take your 2 minutes and fill the feedback in. Thank you so much. I'm now waiting for questions or any contributions.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Peter Buluma, and I just wanted to pose a question to our speaker today. That how do you deal with supervision fatigue? You as the supervisor, you have been working with the student, and it seems like the students take quite some time to respond and things like those ones. So you end up like you're almost giving. How is
Mm.
the best way can you handle supervision fatigue? Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. Appreciate that question. I think it's an important question that you're asking because as much as we keep saying these are students and obviously they're people, we need to remember that we are people as well. And I think it always, for me personally, it comes back to the point of how can I best assist or how can I assist someone else if I myself am not feeling well or I myself am not feeling at the maximum or feeling energized, shall we say. So it comes back to many of us would have heard the statement, we can't pour into someone else, or for lack of a better word, um, if our glass itself is empty. So if we reach a point where we honestly have tried everything in terms of assisting the student, and it's starting to actually affect us in terms of we are now being burnt out, let's just say because of all the deadlines or whatever else may be coming onto your plate. I think it's important for us to actually take a step back because if we have multiple students as well, by us actually burning out and becoming fatigued, our ability to help them is actually going to be diminished as well. So I think, yes, you're very correct in saying when it comes on, many people have said when it comes to supervision and when it comes to work in academia, there is a lot of different responsibilities that you have to actually juggle. But I think that our ability to identify when we ourselves are starting to become a bit fatigued, we can identify this maybe by the level at which we're critiquing a particular work or the submissions that we are making to our supervision, to our supervisors or our line managers. Then we actually need to have a conversation with our line managers and say, you know what, this is what I've identified. And I've spoken to some very senior, I'll give an example. One of my previous supervisors, they actually had a conversation, and many of a lot of what I actually speak about, it's either through um, some experience, or a lot of the time I like to actually speak to, I enjoy having conversations, especially with like academics. And one of my supervisors actually told me exactly what I'm telling you would be that there was a period where she was actually feeling very, very burnt out, and she could actually notice it in terms of how she was interacting with the students and her quality of work. And what she actually did is went and had a conversation with the HOD, and I think they managed to arrange in terms of working from home for a week or two, just so you can recharge your batteries. And when you do come back, you can actually function much better as well. So, Dr. Peter, I hope that answers your question. If not, please let me know and I'll try to expand where I can. Okay, we see there is. Oh, Dr. Peter, sorry, I see you're unmuted. You can go ahead. If there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. You have answered my question, but you find that this is one of the common problems that supervisors face.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a comment from Dr. Kofi. It says, "Thank you for the presentation. Do you have to create a feedback tracking for the student to see that upon several efforts by you, there is still underperformance?" Well, I think, it's always good for us to have documentation. And you can go as far as, let me put it like this. In my in one of my previous roles, there was a research group where the supervisor at every Friday between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, they would have a progress meeting. Now, of all the days, he did choose a Friday for some reason. I think that's only the day his diary was free. And in this meeting, he actually would ask them to submit something like a timesheet or a progress report in terms of what did you do for the week. So I think in terms of this feedback tracking for the student to see that they still underperform, I think it's good, because if this needs to be escalated later on, or if the student is disputing in terms of, let's just say you gave them a deadline and they missed it, because it's all verbal communication, it's always more difficult for you to prove as well. So just having the tracking document, because allow the student to have access to it as well. And by doing so, you're protecting both of yourselves. So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Kofi. I'll hand over back to you,
Thank you, Dr. David, and thanks to the colleagues for engaging. Uh, just one question from my side, Doc. When does underperformance become a formal issue and now requiring institutional intervention? Like, how can a supervisor say that now I need
yeah,
to
escalate this.
get institution involved?
Let's just say we understand, let's just take in terms of a PhD, right? And we know that a student, well, when I was doing my PhD, we had 3 years in which I think the maximum time may have gone up. I'm not completely sure, but we had 3 years. Now, if let's just say by the second year, I'm still working on my proposal, I'm not responding to my supervisor's emails, I'm not attending meetings, there's no progress that I'm making, I'm just telling that I'm still working on my proposal. I think in that sort of scenario, it would be appropriate for the supervisor to actually escalate this further. The reason being is because the supervisor understands that, fine, you're still working your proposal, you only have 1 year left to complete your lab work and to complete your writing. So if the supervisor sees that too much of time is actually being taken and the minimum time left for your degree is actually not enough for you to complete the amount of work that needs to be done, you consistently not meeting deadlines, you're missing the quality of your work is not there. If they can identify that you're actually not going to make your final submission deadline, I think then they have every right to actually escalate it. And I think instead of you first moving, I think there's a chain of command in terms of when you are escalating the situation. I think the first thing you would do is possibly have a chat with your line manager or your HOD, make them aware of the situation, and obviously they will have more institutional knowledge and guide you on what the next steps would be. So I think in terms of a formalized process where you place a student on academic probation or anything of that sort there, I think there are preceding steps that need to be followed before that. So I hope that answers your question, Nkosi. I think it's going to be dependent on the work, what progress a student has actually made. Have you seen anything substantial, and are they able to make their deadline in terms of submission as well? I hope that answers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. I don't know if colleagues still have questions. Colleagues, if you do have a questions, just unmute your mic, or alternatively type under the chat before like. Okay, if there are no questions, Dr. David, maybe in closing, any last word from your side before we can officially close the session?
Yeah, I'll just like to say one more thing. Often when we speak about these types of topics, addressing underperformance or, let's just say providing effective feedback or dealing with issues that we have in terms of supervision, sometimes it's easy for us to look at it from the perspective of, the student just does not want to work, or the student is lazy, or whatever else it may be. But I'd just like to bring to our attention that just like many of us, may have had certain challenges that we faced in higher degrees, and when we were in that situation, I think that what is always interesting is if we can take a similar perspective moving into supervision. Just at that point, how we hoped that people would understand our unique circumstances. Sometimes life does happen, um, and to take that into consideration and provide the assistance that's needed. I always feel it's important and something that I hope to do more, as a supervisor, would be to try and bring in that perspective when I'm supervising my student. Yes, we do have rules and regulations and deadlines that we have to meet, but we also need to be cognizant of the fact that we are working with people, and sometimes life can get in the way and life can get very busy. So with that, I think in terms of supervision, let's always try to be as supportive as possible while still staying under the rules and regulations of the university. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending and thank you all for the comments. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll hand over back to Nkosi, who will actually close the session. Thank you, Nkosi.
Thank you, colleagues, for taking your time once again in attending this workshop. Without your attendance, this workshop wouldn't be a success. And to our facilitator as well, Dr. Lorenzo David, that was a very informative and insightful presentation. Thank you for your time as well. Colleagues, a quick reminder with regards to feedback evaluation, which I've shared under the chat. We kindly request you, colleagues, to take your 2 minutes. It helps us in terms of improving our service delivery as well as to give feedback to our facilitators for taking their time. Before I can officially end the session, I don't know if I will be ending or closing anyone out who has a pending question or any contributions. Okay, still waiting on that. Just a quick reminder or an announcement to say, colleagues who haven't received the certificate of attendance for any workshop that they attended in May. So you are more than welcome to send us an email with the title of the workshop that you have attended, and we will issue a certificate. With regards to June workshops, colleagues, certificate will be sent out by end of tomorrow, which is Friday. So if by next week you don't or you didn't receive any of the June workshop attendance certificate, you are also more than welcome to email us and with the title of the workshop, and we will be happy to assist you in terms of issuing a certificate. Reminder, colleagues, to make sure that you register your details for the workshop. So it is very important to capture your details, correct details, so that you can avoid your certificate being issued in a wrong format or with any missing information. So, with that being said, colleagues, thank you so much once again for joining, and thank you to our facilitator, Dr. Lorenzo David. You can have a great day further and keep warm. I'm now ending this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.